Resuming debate, the honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honour to speak on behalf of the people of Timmins James Bay, and people are very tired. People have come through really difficult times, and this third wave, I think, is hitting us the hardest of all. People's emotions are stretched, small businesses are hanging by a thread, and we should never have been in this situation where these new variants are causing such havoc and destruction and heartache. And I would like to say that the people of Canada have inspired me so incredibly by their determination, by stepping up. People are carrying heavy loads, and they're not giving in to conspiracy. That's a small margin. The average person is doing their part. But COVID is a very hard teacher, and COVID is teaching us just how unequal our society is, and COVID exposes the hypocrisy of governments who are refusing to step up and show leadership. If we're frustrated at anything, it's the complete lack of a national vision and an international vision to respond to a pandemic that is worse than anything we could have ever imagined before. I think part of the example is this motion today that the leader of the opposition has decided that he's going to demand that we have everyone vaccinated by the May long weekend, when the Conservatives know that's not true. So what are they doing here? They want a gotcha moment. We don't need gotcha moments, and Canadians don't need gotcha moments. We need a plan. But we don't see a plan from this Liberal government. We see our Prime Minister at the beginning of the pandemic, he really rallied Canadians. It was going to be the Team Canada approach. That's what people wanted. People were willing to do their part. But then Mr. Team Canada started missing game after game, shrugging it off, refusing to deal with the issue of the border closures, refusing to deal with the fact that we don't have vaccine capacity in Canada. While other countries were investing in vaccines, he believed that we could trust the international market, and hey, the international market would look after us. The guy is the last of the Davos believers, and we're suffering for it today. When CERB ended, that's when the workers began to die. And we pushed this government to put in place a national sick benefits program, which the Liberals laughed at, but they agreed to. But it's cumbersome and it's difficult to use. And we have workers and racialized workers dying in horrific numbers right now, while we see the absolute negligence in Ontario of the Doug Ford government. And this is another failure of the Liberal government. They don't mind that Doug Ford is looking like a complete buffoon in his negligence, but they're more than willing to say, well, that's a provincial jurisdiction. There is no national vision. There is no desire to stand up and fight and say we need to work together. The enormous capacity of the federal government to offer help, to bring together an emergency plan, as the New Democrats asked for, that could have addressed the crisis that's happening in places like Vaughan, Peel, Scarborough, to see hundreds and hundreds of people lining up in the cold to try and get a vaccine in Scarborough shocked me. I never thought I'd see something like this in this country. What we're learning now from the first wave of the pandemic is 3,700 senior citizens died in the long-term care homes in Ontario. And the negligence and indifference to their suffering was known, it was documented, and nobody bothered to go in and enforce the rules. And people died. And finally, the Army had to go in, and they found senior citizens left in diapers. They found senior citizens left in rooms where they weren't sick, but with COVID patients. There was negligence, and people died. People died in numbers that are of wartime totals. 3,700 of our parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts died from that negligence. And we should have learned a lesson, but we didn't. There was a belief that, well, we'll just carry on and hope we'll get through, and, maybe all the vaccines will come, and, maybe we can end the lockdowns quicker. And now we're into this third wave where who's dying? It's young. It's racialized. It's Indigenous in the urban centers because they have to go to work. They have no choice. And Doug Ford's solution was he was going to call the cops, stop them on their way to work, make sure the kids couldn't play in the playgrounds. But we never heard this Prime Minister once step up and say, what's happening in Peel, in Brampton, in those factories, in the Amazon warehouse, which is a partner of the Liberal government, where 900 people got sick. We never heard the Prime Minister say, we've got to deal with this as a national disaster? It's because, let's face it, Canada, there are considered disposable people. And the disposable people are the Indigenous, racialized people working in these factories. The fact that we lost 13-year-old Emily Victoria Vegas. She died. She should never have died, but her parents had to go to work because we have Doug Ford and this prime minister arguing about something everybody knows we need, which is a proper sick day benefit. And so why are they saving money with this? Because what it's doing is it's extending the length of this crisis. I received my first vaccine the other day. I was very proud, but I'm told I won't get my second dose till August. That's a long time in the life of a pandemic. Canada had the opportunity to create to produce the AstraZeneca vaccine here. We turned it down. This government opted for the international market. We are falling further and further behind. We are now 33rd globally for the doses per 100 people. We are 74th globally for the number of people who are fully vaccinated. And so when I see the Liberals come into the House and pat themselves on the back about what a great job they're doing, I find that to be an absolute shameful disgrace, because it's about the Liberal Party brand, not about the fact that as the federal government, they could be bringing people together, that we needed an emergency response to an unprecedented catastrophe. And that's what this is. It is a catastrophe. And so we see also Canada on the global stage stealing vaccines from the third world because they blew it here. The COVAX vaccine program that they took from. The fact that Canada has been called out by third world countries for blocking the WTO waiver in order that third world countries can actually produce their own vaccines. And I ask this Prime Minister, Mr. Davos, Mr. Trust the global markets, does he think that this pandemic won't come and hit us even harder with more virulent strains if the third world is not able to be vaccinated? We are in this crisis right now because of the new strains coming out of places like Brazil. As it stands now, even if we get vaccinated by the end of the year, we will not have worldwide vaccine immunity until 2023. The potential, as we've seen from this disastrous virus, is that it's mutating fast and it's getting more virulent. So the fact that the Prime Minister is using Canada at the international stage to stop the ability of third world countries to produce their own vaccines because he wants to protect the intellectual patent rights of big pharma shows that this Prime Minister is more than willing to put corporate interests ahead of the lives of people. And that will come back to bite Canada in a very concerning and deep way. I think that what COVID has taught us is that we hit this catastrophe last March and realized very quickly that within 3 weeks, millions of Canadians didn't have enough financial savings to pay their rent. We learned that our trust in global free trade meant that we didn't even have the capacity to create PPE, and workers were having to go into very dangerous situations on the front lines because Canada couldn't make its own PPE. And when the decision could have been made a year ago to start investing in vaccines, like the company in Calgary that's trying to get Canadian vaccines on the market, we opted to trust international capital to look after us, and they're not looking after us. Madam Speaker, we need to bring people together at this time. This third wave could easily become a much more dangerous fourth wave, but it needs us to actually start putting the needs of Canadians and to respect the incredible suffering and vigilance that they're showing. We need to rise to where the average Canadian is and stop playing these games and get a plan to save lives, particularly right now where we're seeing so many young deaths in the factories and warehouses in the GTA.